What's going on? Welcome to part 2 of my e-tuning guide for those of you who want to get your car e-tuned and improve your car's drivability and your own enjoyment. I'll be showing you the entire e-tuning process on my STI step by step, and I'll offer a review of the final product. This is applicable to the STI, the 6-speed manual, the CVT. In fact, this process will be very similar regardless of what supported model you have altogether. Long video, so check out the video description for links to specific parts if you're short on time. If you've gotten your car e-tuned before, I'd love to hear from you in the comments section. Before you actually get your e-tune, you have to first decide which particular tune you want. Now, I'll be showing you the process on my STI with a basic single map protune. But as you can see right here, you might have options, and these options will be different depending on the tuner and the particular car model that you have. For example, this tuner offers all of these tunes for the 2015 plus WRX. You can get your basic single map tune for regular pump fuel. If you install the flex fuel kit, you can get a tune for that particular kit. They even offer their own off-the-shelf maps, which wouldn't technically be a pro tune because you only get the one map tailored to the car model in general and not the specific car that you own. And because of that, off-the-shelf maps are built with a wide margin of error, and they typically leave a lot of power on the table. So what we're really after is one of these full-blown pro tunes that are developed by analyzing the performance of our cars through data logs, and they're tailored to the mods that we have and the fuel that we'll be using. You can even add some add-ons like a burble tune if you fancy. Personally, I just went with a tune. At this stage, make sure that you disclose which fuel you'll be using for the tune. Remember that once you tune for that particular fuel, you can't go to a lower grade on that particular tune. And also accurately and completely disclose every power mod installed in your car. This will aid in getting your baseline map and may even help the tuner identify potential issues before you even get started. So once you decide what you want and purchase the tune, you'll simply sit back and wait for the instructions to arrive by email. While we wait for the email, we'll get the access port ready. By now, you should have already downloaded and installed Access Port Manager, which is going to allow you to do a lot of important things, but most notably, you'll be able to see the maps in the access port, add the maps that your tuner sends to you, download your data logs, and update the firmware, which is very important, and you'll be able to see all of that shortly. The entire e-tuning process will start at your computer. Here's that initial email with detailed instructions on how to proceed. Now, it's important that you read the email completely and ask questions from your tuner if you have any at this stage. Every tuner will be different, but the basics of the tune will be very similar. That email will likely have a baseline map attached to it. The baseline map will approximate the values needed based on the currently installed mods and the fuel that will be used. The email should also have instructions on how to load the map into your access port, and that's an easy process. First, you're going to find the attachment on the email. In my case, you can see it right down here and simply download it to your computer. That should only take a split second. Then you'll open up your download location and you should see the map that you just downloaded in there. So I'm going to close my email here and open up Access Port Manager. Now, if like me, you get prompted to update your firmware, be sure to do it. The process only takes a couple minutes and it'll ensure that your access port is free of bugs. When it's finished, click on the Manage tab up here. Make sure that under Filter, Maps is selected if it isn't already. And that's going to bring up every single map loaded in the access port. At this point, all you have to do is drag the baseline map that was emailed to you into that folder. It's going to ask you if you're sure and go ahead and click OK, and that's going to be it. If you scroll through the maps, you'll see the new map that you just added is on the list now. And now we're going to be ready to tune the car with that map. So up here, click on Eject Access Port to disconnect it safely, and then grab it and head to your car. In the car, the access port is going to be plugged into the OBD port with the included cable, and there's many different ways to mount it if you choose to do so. Mine's permanently installed to the car with this vent mount, and the cable is already plugged in, so all I have to do is slide the access port in and it should turn right on. When you reach the home screen, navigate down to Tune, then go to Change ECU Map. Now, we want the ignition switch to be on, but we want the car off. So if you have one of these push starts, you accomplish that by hitting the button twice without pushing on the brakes, and that's the same thing as turning the key to the on position. When you get to the screen, make sure you select ECU Reflash because we want the tune permanently installed into the ECU until we decide to change it ourselves later. After a few seconds, you should see all of your available maps, including the one that we just added to the access port. And of course, that's the one we're going to select. In my case, that's MBOT tuned version 0.1. You're going to get this warning right here to connect a battery charger to your car while you do this. The car that I'm tuning right now has a strong battery and I had no issues at all, but I do recommend that if you can. So from this point, we're basically just following the directions on the access port. The entire process only takes a few minutes. It'll ask you to turn the ignition switch off, so do that when prompted and hit the center button to continue. The access port will take a minute to reinitialize the computer and then once again ask you to turn the ignition switch to the on position. Remember that at no point we're turning on the car during the process. So hit OK, and after a few seconds, we'll be done. The final step is turning the ignition switch off for at least 15 seconds before starting the car. Every time we get a revised map, we're going to follow this exact procedure to load the new map onto the ECU. Now that we have the tune installed in the car, it's time to start data logging so the tuner can get all the information they need to really dial in the tune. So what is data logging? Data logging allows you to record sensor data for a given period of time. So from the time that you start the logger to the time that you stop. Say for instance, you have to do a wide open throttle pull on third gear from 2,500 RPMs to 6,700 RPMs. You'll start the data log before you reach 2,500 RPMs, maybe at 2,000, and stop it right after you pass 6,700 RPMs. This is very easy to do, and the access port allows you to data log so nothing else is necessary except the list of the parameters that the tuner wants you to record. Different tuners may request different parameters. I'll show you the full list that I use for my eTune in a sec, but it is critical that we are data logging every single parameter that the tuner requests, because if you miss a critical one, you might have to do that pull all over again and it will delay the tune. And conversely, don't just go in there and select every parameter, because that too will delay the tune, since you'll create a huge data log with a lot of useless information that the tuner will have to sift through, as well as possibly cause latency issues that may degrade the quality of the log. The tuner will look at all of these data to gauge the performance, but perhaps most importantly, the health of the engine after every pull, and then make the necessary adjustments to incrementally increase the performance of the car until it's no longer safe to go further and the car can make more power safely, or until a predetermined goal is reached. So once you get the list of data logging parameters from your tuner, print it out like I did or pull it up on your phone. From your access port's main screen, navigate to gauges, then scroll up to that little arrow on the top to enter the setup menu. Once there, we're gonna select configure data logging. And that's gonna pull up the complete list of parameters that the access port will allow you to log. As you can probably guess, every parameter that has a green dot will be logged. From this point, it's a matter of selecting every parameter on your list. They are in alphabetical order in the access port, so it helps if you sort your list alphabetically ahead of time. So just go down the list and select the ones that you need and deselect the ones that you don't. When you're done, scroll all the way up to the top and check your list again to make sure you didn't miss one. Once you're satisfied, you can back out to the previous menu. Now, once I do the first data log in a minute, I'll show you exactly what the data log looks like. Before logging any pulls, there's a few prerequisites that should be outlined in your instructions, and we'll use the gauges in the access port to help out with that. Your tuner will tell you what he wants you to monitor in real time so that you can tell if there's an issue that you should rectify, and that's what I'm doing right now. From the gauges screen, go back into the setup menu, scroll up to change gauge layout and select 6 gauges. Scroll down to the gauge you want to change and select it, then select change monitor and scroll through the list for the gauge that you want to show. We are going to repeat that for all 6 gauges. The reason we selected these in particular is because before we do our pulls, we have to ensure that the car is fully warmed up. So we're going to make sure that the coolant temp is stabilized in the middle and that the AVCS is at 0 and that the air fuel sensor is fully warmed up. The boost will allow you to see if you're over boosting. Feedback knock will show you any knock event in real time, while Find Knock Learn shows you minor corrections that may be applied at a specific RPM. And throughout this entire tuning process, we have to make sure that our DAM is at 1.0. If it's not at 1.0, the car's pulling timing, and you have to wait until it goes back to normal before proceeding. So these gauges will be your window into the health of your car. They won't tell the whole story, that's what the data logs are for, but if something major is wrong, you'll be able to tell and then stop the tune and consult with the tuner on how to move forward. Now that we have installed the tune and configured all of the data logging parameters and gauges the tuner requires, we're going to let the tuner know so that we can move on to the next step. While we wait for the email, I'd like to share a couple of helpful tips before starting. First, be sure that your car is already broken in, not only for the engine, but also for you to have the familiarity that you need with a car before attempting to do wide open throttle pulls. Be sure to check out the engine oil and change it if it's been a while. Same thing with the air filter. If it's been a while, it might also be worth cleaning the MAF sensor. Thoroughly check the car for leaks, not only from fluids, but also vacuum leaks. And of course, make sure that your brakes and tires are healthy. For the duration of the e-tune, your dam needs to be at a perfect 1.0. If it's not, your car's pulling timing and you have to wait until it normalizes before continuing. One common item that causes that is bad gas. And if you just fill your tank and your dam drops, it might not show right away. So I would recommend driving around for 50 miles or so before calling it good and not adding any fuel to your car if you don't have to for the duration of the tune, just in case. Okay, so we have received the email with the instructions for the initial baseline logs, and you can expect something very similar regardless of your tuner. The logs include an idle log, a driving log, a cruising log, and a wide open throttle log. Depending on your mods, the tuner might request the wide open throttle pull after they analyze the others. In my case, I'm doing all 4 logs at once and sending them to the tuner. You can do all of these in one shot, one after the other. You should only have to do the idle, driving, and cruising log only once if your car is in perfect working order. The idle log is simple, and all that is required is for the car to be fully warmed up. You'll know that you're fully warmed up when your coolant needle is no longer climbing, your AVCS is at 0, at least for the STI, and your AFR sensor is moving around. If you do this after a short drive, you should be okay. So once warmed up, make sure your e-brake is engaged and put your car in neutral. Navigate to gauges and then hit that center button to begin the data log. You will know you're logging because the access port will say logging right up here and the lights in the middle will begin to flash like you see here. So for the next 4 minutes, just sit there and let your car idle. And when your 4 minutes is up, simply hit the button again and that stops the data logging and records the file. Since the car is warmed up already, we're going to go ahead and do the driving log right after. If you didn't have your car in Sport Sharp mode, go ahead and put it there. This log is just meant to capture the performance of the car during normal driving. So we're not going to do anything crazy here, just driving around like we normally would. When you're ready, start the log and then drive around town for 5 minutes. Starting, stopping, moderate acceleration, that's all fine. Since the cruising log is next, try driving in the general direction of the highway or any other road where you can set your cruise control uninterrupted. When your time is up, simply stop the driving log. When you reach the highway, we're going to start the cruising log, and the objective here is to drive 5 minutes at a steady RPM. I chose 3,000 RPMs in 5th gear, which put me at a comfortable 60 miles per hour. The easiest way to do this is just to put your cruise control on. I chose the speed because most traffic on this highway goes faster than that, so it was unlikely that I would have to slow down and ruin the log. So once you reach your target RPMs, start your logger and drive at that RPM for 5 minutes. And when you're done, go ahead and stop the logger and then we can move on. The next log will be the most important, and that's the wide open throttle log. This is the first of what could be quite a few, so it's important to heed the instructions from your tuner and understand what to look for ahead of time. In particular, overboosting and knocking, which you should be able to monitor right on the access port since we set up the gauges for that earlier. Make sure your STI is in Sport Sharp mode. If you have a CVT WRX, go to Sports mode instead. The log from this tuner requires going from 2,500 RPMs to 6,700 RPMs in 3rd gear at wide open throttle. On the STI, going to 6,700 RPMs in 3rd gear takes you to 80 miles per hour. I pulled to the side of the road, waited for the road to clear. I then started driving until I reached 3rd gear and went to 2,000 RPMs. When you get to 2,000 RPMs, start the logger on the access port, then push the gas pedal all the way to the floor. Leave the pedal all the way down until the car passes 6,700 RPMs, then push the clutch in and put your car in a proper gear and slow down to a safe speed. As soon as you can safely do it, turn off your logger and that's it. That's a wide open throttle pull. It's all over in a matter of seconds. Just be sure that you don't go wide open throttle before you hit at least 2,000 RPM so you don't lug your engine. With all of our initial logs done, it's time to head home so I can show you how to download them and get them to the tuner. When you get home, grab your access port and plug it into your computer and bring up Access Port Manager. After the program loads, head up to Filter and select Data Logs, and that's going to bring up every data log in the access port. They are saved automatically in chronological order. So the last data log here, number 6, will also be the most recent one. This will be different for everyone depending on how many logs you already have saved. So make sure you keep track every time that you push that login button. Okay, so now I'm gonna make a folder to throw the logs into, and then simply select the logs I want and drag them into that folder. In this email from my tuner, you can see the naming convention that he prefers. So I'm gonna follow that to rename the logs so that he knows which data log is which. When that's done, simply send the log to your tuner according to the instructions. I simply hit reply, drag the files to the email, and then let the tuner know how the car performed. This is your opportunity to voice any issues if you had any. Once you hit send, the actual tuning process by the tuner will begin. While we wait for that first revision, let me show you what the logs look like. You can do this yourself with most spreadsheet software. I'm simply using Excel to open the data log. This one is for the watt pool I just emailed. Along the top here, you can see all of the parameters that we selected in the access port, and on the side here, the time in seconds. You can look yourself and kind of get an idea of how your car is performing. For example, you can look here and see there were no knock events. You can see your boost levels to make sure you weren't overboosting. You can see your throttle position to determine exactly at what RPMs you achieved wide open throttle. I mean, you can really dig in and figure out exactly how your car is performing. You can also go crazy trying to make sense of it all. And I have only limited know-how in interpreting this data, but your tuner should be very comfortable with it. And that expertise and know-how is exactly what you pay for and why you shouldn't take it for granted when you're selecting your tuner. Okay, so the tuner received the data logs and revised that initial map that we installed, and now the process is going to repeat. I've already shown you exactly how to handle these maps and how to load them into the access port, so I'm not going to bore you with all that again. Just know that for me, it took 5 revisions to completely dial in the tune. Every revision pushed the car a little further without introducing issues like knock. Keep in mind that there is no set time frame between each revision you'll get, since it all depends on the tuner's ability, schedule, and workload. Ideally, your tuner will work quickly and get you your revisions within 48 hours each, but there's just no telling. It could be 24 hours, it could be a week. The quicker you get your data logs and send them back, the quicker your car gets tuned. With that final map, you can consider your car pro-tuned. However, that is not quite the end. Okay, so our car is now tuned. What do we need to look out for after the tune is completed? If you've been around a WRX and you have an access port, you've probably heard the term anxiety port. And that's because these cars have a very aggressive anti-knock strategy, and just about anything makes the numbers on the access port jump around and indicate that there's a problem with the car, when there might not be a problem with the car. The car's just reacting to noises, to perceived knock in the car, perceived or actual knock. So because of that, the access port is always going off, and the best thing that you can do once you tune your car is to put the access port away. However, that is not the case right after you get a tune, a pro tune. It is critical that you plug in your access port after the tune and really monitor the car for knock and anything unusual. You're gonna have instructions from your tuner that's gonna tell you exactly what to look for. If you didn't have any knock before and you start having knock after a tune, that it might be the case that your tune is a little bit too aggressive. You're always going to experience some sort of knock with regular pump fuel. It's just going to happen. And sometimes you're actually going to have fuel that's so bad that it'll lower your dam. That's to be expected. But if you're having these issues magically after you get a tune, that is a really good indication that your tune is not up to par. Now, most tuners are going to give you some sort of grace period after the tune where they will revise the tune for free if there are issues. This is important because most of the time it's a month. So you basically have a month after you get your e-tune to make sure that your car is running great, so you can call it good and you don't have to pay again to get the car retuned. So it's critical that after you get your car pro-tuned, that you're driving around, that you have the access port pulled up, and that you're looking and keeping a close eye on feedback knock, on feedback learn, that you're watching your boost levels, making sure that you're not over boosting, that your dam is staying steady at a perfect 1.0. Now, do remember that fuel that you get sometimes will affect that. So if your car is running fine for a week after you got pro-tuned, next thing you know, you fill the tank and you start having issues, more than likely that's going to be the fuel that you put in the car. But if you get that final map and you install it so you have -8 knock or something to that effect, then that's cause to investigate further. So you can make sure that the car is playing good with a tune. So that's critical. Remember to only put the fuel that you tuned the car with. If you tuned with 93, which I tuned with 93, then I'm not gonna go back down to 91. If in a pinch I have to, because there is no 93, that's okay to do that. It's not the end of the world. However, don't fill your entire tank. You know, just put in enough so that it can get you to a proper gas station and stay off boost. After the tune, reduce your service intervals. Your car is a little bit more aggressive now. It's supposed to be a little bit more aggressive now. Take that into consideration. Change your oils, change your filters, change everything a little bit earlier than you normally would. There's no magic number that I can give you. Just be mindful of the fact that your car is working a little bit harder. So normally when you tune your car, you're gonna be driving it a little bit more aggressively. So you should reduce your service intervals anyways. And it goes without saying that if you add any other part that changes the breathing characteristics of the car or any other power mod, you have to retune. So the tune is not a one-size-fits-all. The tune is for the parts that you have in your car now and for the fuel that you use. That's it. And a lot of times tuners will have discounts for retunes for adding parts. So that's one good reason to select a good tuner right off the bat and develop a good relationship so that you can actually keep taking advantage of these discounts. Last thing I want to talk about is the tune itself. All I did was a stage 1 plus tune basically. So all I have in the car right now is a power mod anyways, is an intake, and we all know that, you know, that doesn't make much difference right now before you start replacing parts of the exhaust. So I wasn't expecting crazy gains. I wasn't expecting anything that would completely blow me away. So what can you expect from the Pro Tune? The car is definitely more aggressive with the tune than it was before. There is one aspect of the tune that I want to mention, and this is actually also the case for the off-the-shelf maps from Cobb. Cobb has what they call boost select. If you drove this car before you did any sort of tune and you notice that you put the car on intelligent mode, you can literally feel your RPMs dropping in relationship to the throttle position. In other words, Subaru literally remapped the throttle for the different modes, so intelligent sports and sport sharp mode. So there's a very noticeable difference between sport sharp and intelligent mode, and you can make the car much easier to drive for beginners on intelligent mode if you're using intelligent mode. However, when you do an off-the-shelf map or you do a Pro Tune, that goes away. You're gonna have the same exact throttle mapping for all 3 modes. Basically all you're doing with the mode buttons at that point is selecting the boost. I'm not entirely sure why that's the case, why they're doing that. I don't know if that's some sort of limitation in the car or is some sort of limitation with the tuners. However, I would have much rather had intelligent mode stay the way that it was, or at least be throttled back considerably, because I enjoyed having that difference between intelligent and sport sharp mode, and that difference went away. So for driving around town, unless you're getting into boost, you're not gonna feel a difference between intelligent and sport sharp mode. So on intelligent mode, I can get to about 8 PSI. On sports mode, I can get to about 15. And then on sports sharp, it takes me to the full limits of the turbo. That's what Cobb calls boost select. That is what you will get in most instances, is the boost select after you tune your car. Very exciting stuff. So I've enjoyed the Pro Tune quite a bit. I do like the way how aggressive the car is now. The throttle is far more sensitive and it really pulls. So that's got me excited about getting all of the parts together for a stage 2 setup and redo the Pro Tune to make considerably more power, and that's gonna be next. But for now, I thank you so much for watching. I appreciate you coming here. I hope you learned something that you didn't know before, and if you still have questions, put them in the comments section and I'll do my best to answer them. If you liked the video, got something out of it, make sure that you give it a like and consider subscribing if you haven't already for a lot more videos just like this. Thanks so much for watching. I'll see you next video. Take care.